right, folks. Well, welcome to week number 6, Practical Applications of Risk Management, Public Safety Operations. As usual, I'd like to take just a couple seconds before we get going to get any feedback or thoughts from Michelle, and then we'll get into the meat of the matter. So either Gordon or Michelle, any thoughts as we begin this week?
Sure. Well, we are talking about financial, reputational, and political this week, which all work together in sort of a system. Sort of a parallel from the business world is that a bigger and bigger part of value comes from what they call intangible assets. Basically, your reputation, your brand strength, your likelihood of not getting sued for something stupid, your reputation. And so that reputational aspect of risk is very, very important, both to your financial health and to your political relationships. Because if you have a bad reputation, politicians are going to have a hard time opening the purse strings to give you the resources that you need. And so all of these work together, and a lot of the controls are very much internal, but a lot of the outcome and a lot of the outreach that you need to do is external. So it's going to be an interesting session today.
Excellent. Gordon?
You're right on the button, Michelle. These are all tied together. If you don't have the political support because you don't have the community support, then you don't get the financial support, and it all starts falling apart. So this is a very important session here. And the political risks, my gosh, we have an election year coming up, and so much is dependent on the way people vote and how they feel. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and again, going a little bit deeper on Tuesday night.
All right. Well, thanks to both of you for starting off with a quick intro. So, as I said, it's Module 6, and the risk families we're going to be talking about this evening are financial, reputational, and political. So, I think the first one, financial risk, talks a little bit about oversight, resources, fraud detection and prevention. And reputational risk, and one that I think is one of the most fascinating, is rogue employees, and you'll speak to those issues as one of them. And then the last thing for tonight, as far as topical areas, are political risks, as Gordon just mentioned: budgets, community relations, polarization, or continuity or stasis of change. So that being said, I'm going to begin the moderation part of this discussion by going first to Gordon to talk a little bit about financial risk. Gordon, I'm turning it over to you.
Everything dealing with money is filled with risk. Everything dealing with money is filled with risk. Budgets are filled with risk. Asset seizure and forfeiture is filled with risk. Overtime is filled with risk. Grant money is filled with risk. Credit cards are filled with risk. The bottom line is, do you have sufficient control measures in place to address those risks? And so many people at all levels in the organization get in so much trouble for not properly managing financial risks. I'm not talking out of school here. You can go online today and read what's going on in Indiana. This is a national news story. A single sheriff in Indiana has stolen millions and millions of dollars. His wife was indicted. One of his daughters was indicted. They had city credit cards. They were using credit cards for personal purchases, luxury cars, the whole thing. My gosh, what were you thinking? What little control measures were in place to allow that to occur? Credit card risk. If you have nothing to do tonight, and I know how busy you are, just Google a misuse of credit cards by government employees. You will get 10 million hits. And it's just embarrassing, the amount of people who get in trouble for misusing credit cards. I had a state credit card from California. I knew the audit process they had. There is no way I would ever misuse a state credit card because I knew how closely they were examined. I guess that's the exception rather than the rule. Grant money is filled with risk. You see sheriffs getting indicted around America, chiefs of police getting indicted around America for taking drug money and using it to purchase a car for them, a car for their family, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, everything dealing with money is filled with risk. For my firefighter friends, the fill the boot is filled with risk. And I've been told that is gradually decreasing around America. But my gosh, number one, You've got people collecting money in the name of the fire department. Number one, they're walking through traffic. That is a workers' comp case right there. They're falling down. They've got this money. Nobody's accountable for the money. They got buckets of money back at the fire station. How do you think that's going to end up? Everything dealing with money is filled with risk. I think I've mentioned this already. One of the most successful programs I put together for the CHP was a program for kids getting off probation. The top 10 ways that the California Highway Patrol is going to fire you. And I spent a lot of time talking about all the financial games that people play that everybody's played before and they've gotten caught. Financial risks are absolutely huge, but I'm going to let somebody talk about this who really understands finance. So Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. Well, it's funny. It's actually not so much finance understanding, but psychology understanding and behavior understanding. And, it goes to what affects the behaviors and your point about, hey, I knew that the audit system was pretty tough. And so there's no way. I mean, I can't imagine you taking advantage of it anyway, because I know you and, ethics is part of it. But if people who are maybe not ethical know that they're highly likely to get busted, they're much less likely to get involved in shenanigans. And so that goes to transparency. Very, very, very important part of financial conversations, budget conversations, how money is spent conversations. And that can be everything from how people use the petty cash to what people spend for various things. Are people skimming off? They're basically charging the department for more than something really cost and getting some kickbacks under the table, things like that. So I think it's important to have a good auditor. And it's funny, in some of my work on economic development and developing countries, I said, kind of tongue in cheek, but not really, the best thing we could do for that country is to train everybody to be a financial auditor. But it was half joking, but actually not really, because I think that's very important. So transparent. And I think that comes down to making sure that the financial reports that you send to whoever the report is, the city manager or the state manager, whoever your agency reports to, make sure that those are clear, well done, sent in advance of the deadlines. And then as the leader of a department, also be transparent with the employees and set an example. An organization that regularly spends ridiculous amounts of money on overpriced restaurants and things like that is not setting a great example. The flip side of it is so many organizations, the bean counters have a not great reputation, for being absolutely, just ridiculous and crazy systems. So don't be that organization either. Make it easy for people to report. So, don't be so much of a pain that people don't want to be open about what they're doing. Those people might be tempted to misreport things just to not have to deal with the situation. And then finally, the political side of financial budgets is you want to communicate to the people who control the purse strings the importance of avoided costs, of resilience. There are studies showing that $1 invested in resilience and protecting yourself from risks can pay off anywhere from $4 to $12 on the dollar. It's a very good investment. And too many organizations forget to think about avoided costs when they're thinking about spending on things that could save them money in the future and also avoid the hassle of something going wrong that they hadn't protected for. So hugely, hugely important. And of course, financial shenanigans will hurt your reputation pretty badly. And that will in turn tighten the purse strings from the politicians who don't want to be seen as giving money to a profligate agency.
Michelle, when I was active, whenever there was a money issue, cash, fungible money, I always wanted to count it with a witness. Never let one person count the money. And I've seen this in so many churches where one person counts the money and all of a sudden money's disappearing. I've seen it in fire departments. I've seen it in police departments. You have to have at least two people, make it a conspiracy at least, where two people have to agree that we're going to steal money. Parking, you'll remember parking meters. I always wondered why they had two people collecting the coins on the parking meters. Well, that's exactly why. Two people, one could keep an eye on the other collecting money. So I was doing work in an agency back east, and I noticed a single woman, not single in terms of relationships, but a woman by herself in the parking van going from meter to meter collecting money. And the next day I had an audience of people, and I say stupid things every now and then. And I said, just last night I saw, a single person going out collecting money from parking meters. I have no idea who's in the crowd. And I said, that's just ripe for theft. And I said, whoever, who that is, there's a very good probability they're stealing money from you. And all of a sudden, the chief of police comes in the room, and I get dismissed and sent home. And they were outraged. Her husband was in the room, and he was outraged because his wife was the parking. Anyhow, I get a phone call 2 years later that this woman was involved in a traffic collision, and there was thousands of quarters falling out of her Volkswagen. They were just loaded with quarters. She had a trunk full of quarters. The chief never called me and apologized. But everything dealing with money. We have fire departments around America right now under criminal indictment, criminal investigations for RICO. Hey, Mary, I see you're working on Saturday. I'm working on Friday. How about if I call in sick on Friday and you can backfill me on overtime, and I'll call in sick, you call in sick on Saturday and I'll backfill you? That's a criminal conspiracy to defraud people. People bringing their own little receipt books in. And, as a sergeant, you look at the receipts, and I got this thing for numbers. And you see 3 months apart, it's the next consecutive number. And this guy had his own little receipt book filling out receipts for things he never bought. So everything dealing with money, and that audit process is absolutely essential. And it's got to be an ongoing process also, not just one and done where you take a look at it, but somebody who knows the industry coming in and doing the audits is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and
Jay?
today it's actually easier because you've got so much more digital use of money, so that you're getting less physical cash. You don't have the quarters anymore. You have those apps, and digital on the one hand is much easier because it appears in a stream, but digital also is actually quite easy to muck around with. So that's worth keeping in mind as well. And your story about the two meter collectors reminds me of a story that I've heard. I have no idea that it's true, whether it's true or not, but it's about the guards, Buckingham Palace, that they switch them around so that it's different groups all the time. Because if you have the same two people collecting the quarters or whatever they collect, it's quite possible that you get not one person, but two people. So I think that's worth thinking about as well. And really just keeping track of things. Transparency, light of day, open communication is very important.
Jay?
I got out over my skis a little bit when I was listening to the two of you, but I can't see but how incredible the financial piece is directly relates to that next piece that you're talking about, reputational risk and the impact they could have.
Well, on a very serious note, any theft of money from government is a theft from the people. You're stealing from the people, and people recognize that. And so we've got to have these control measures in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. And if it does happen, we need to be upfront and fully transparent on how it happened and what control measures we put in place to make sure it never happens again. Because if you lose that public trust, you have lost everything. You have lost everything. Reputational risks. In today's world of social media, I have learned this. If the lie gets repeated 3 times on social media, the lie becomes the truth. And every public safety agency needs to have a robust presence, not a presence only, but a robust presence on social media, monitoring what's being said. And when people tell a lie about your organization or members thereof, we're not censors. We don't take that down. Leave it up, but explain why it's incorrect. Be very, very clear. This is incorrect. We would not tolerate any behavior like that. You've got to have that robust presence on social media. And so many organizations only find out about this after the fact, where something's been posted and it got traction and people started believing it. And it just is terrible that we are not up to speed on social media. It's one of those, these technology risks. And it's actually the simplest of our technology risks. Malware, software, hacking, ransomware, all that stuff is very difficult. If bad people are intent on behaving badly, they're going to behave badly. But we haven't even figured out social media. Every lawyer I know, when they see a firefighter's name on the bottom of a report, a paramedic's name on the bottom of a report, or a cop's name on the bottom of a report, they go to social media. What are you posting? If they're a criminal defense lawyer and you've got something inappropriate on your website there, not only is that the kiss of death for your career, that's the kiss of death for this particular case. So you have to be very, very careful on running these things. And just as a little aside, apparently I'm the only person in my high school class that doesn't have a presence on Facebook. Apparently I'm the only person in my high school class who's got a background in risk. And every month I get an email from our former class president, Gordon, you're the only member of the class of 68 not on Facebook. Join now. And every month I send him an email back. I did not like you in 1968. Nothing has changed. But the presence on Facebook where firefighters are taking pictures of people who are dying, you've got all the hippie issues, statements from people, bad-mouthing people, criminal misconduct on there. No. We've got to be wise on everything related to social media, and protecting the image of the organization is absolutely paramount.
Yeah. And I think, if you have a rogue employee in whatever capacity, that's going to go public. Somebody's going to record the rude person at the cashier counter, or the mean cop, or whatever. That's going to get out. The odds of it staying quiet are much lower than they used to be. But, you mentioned social media. It's actually a great point, because the way people portray themselves on social media often tells you a lot about who they are. And so if somebody's out there bad-mouthing the organization on social media, or posting pictures of themselves, blind drunk at a party, things like that, those taking bad personal risks, that is highly correlated to the possibility that they're going to be taking bad professional risks, whether it's ethical, whether it's financial, whether it's when they're out on a call and faced with a split-second decision that has huge consequences for lives, for the reputation of the agency. So I think that having policies about social media is really important, and keeping an eye out for those sorts of things. Every once in a while you hear a story about somebody saying something stupid on social media, or posting a stupid story, and they end up getting fired. And that's the company doing what they are supposed to be doing. The other thing, I think back to our conversation last week, about background checks and things like that, which is super relevant to rogue employees. If they were rogue before, if someone who works for you, you find out later on that they were involved in, say, financial improprieties at their previous job, but you should get a forensic auditor right away. Look at their behaviors. If they're driving a car that's really, really, really expensive and doesn't seem to match their salary, if they've got a fancy house, if they wear designer clothes to work, things that don't seem to match, things that don't add up, that's important. There's a little town here in Illinois where a woman had show horses and all sorts of things, and then her pastime was being funded by what she was skimming off. And I think Gordon, do you remember the exact number? It was like $53 million or something.
$53 million, Dixon, Illinois. And was that in your book, or that was in another book that I talked about? Greed, I think, was the name of the book. And it started off in chapter 1 about this woman in Dixon, Illinois, who was buying and selling $1 million racehorses. And she was a low civil servant, promoted up through the ranks in the finance department, and over a 20-some-odd year period, stole $54 million from the city of Dix, Illinois. And you sit back and you say, how can that happen? Well, she must have been a good investor. I guess that's what she is. You'd have to be a very good investor. Michelle,
There's
you
another
mentioned
book, Fool Me Once.
that's it. That's
Fool
it.
Me Once.
Yep.
That's quite good on that. And there's a documentary related to it
Wow.
as well.
Michelle, you mentioned something there, and it's not exactly on point, but that background investigation process, correct me if I already said this in the past and just shut me up, but you hire people, you want to talk to past employers. Well, my brother, he's an attorney, and the advice he gives every company is when someone calls and wants a reference, data hire, data separation. That's it. Did I already talk about this with this group? Because I get mixed up on things. Data hire. Look at this employee, Mary Jones, is making an application to work for us. What do you think about her? She started on this date. She ended on this date. What kind of employee was she? She started on this date. She ended on this date. Would you rehire her? She started on this date. She ended on this date. Anything you say that prevents her from getting a job or him from getting a job, that's a potential for litigation downstream. So when that happens to you in the law enforcement or fire service, where you go to Taco Bell or the donut shop where they used to work before they wanted to become a firefighter, excuse me, what kind of an employee were they? Data hire, data separation. Call the applicant up and you say this: we can no longer proceed with your application for the hiring process. Your former employee, Taco Bell, will not talk to us. However, in our state, there is a labor code section that gives you access to your employment records even after you quit. So make an appointment with Taco Bell and I will go with you to review your records. If they go through those hoops, you know that he or she's going to be a good person. They're not trying to hire anything. But the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And Michelle, you nailed it. When you look at somebody's social media page and they got the beer and they're dancing around with something on their head and they're doing things inappropriate, exactly how are they going to behave at work? Do you really think there's going to be something different here? And one last threat on the social media. I have a good friend who works in the British Secret Service, and he was telling me it is impossible to recruit new agents at this point because they all have a presence on social media and you can't erase it. Once it's out there, it's out there. And with facial recognition, when they try to get a job in the Russian embassy as an interpreter, all the Russians do is run it through facial recognition, and they find these 30-year-old pictures of somebody with a different name on social media. And it's ended up with the death of some of their agents where they were found out not to be who they said they were. So the presence on social media, I worry quite a bit about that. And of course, we never say anything on social media. Well, I've got a First Amendment right. When your First Amendment right to freedom of speech interferes with your department's ability to do their job, that's a huge problem and it needs to be addressed. So the reputation of your organization is paramount.
I think you'll have an opportunity to talk about that in a live session because that is a topical area all the time in this day and age with the right to have First Amendment right versus the rights of the agency. So great conversation.
Jay, just a quick one. How many times have you heard this? 500 attaboys could be wiped out with one aw shucks. And it's not aw shucks, but I can't say the other word. 500 attaboys could be wiped out with one aw shucks. Your entire career can be ruined with one stupid thing on social media.
Well, you made us, both of you talked about it before. Trust is the foundation of everything, and it does not take much, especially something that gets broadcast 1,000 times over, to erode that trust almost immediately. So, great points, Gordon. I think the next point here, and this is one that I think I faced a lot in my career, was political risk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and from both of you.
Now,
Michelle, please go ahead.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
You can't say something like that and not weigh in on it, Jay.
No, I mean, it's like everything, when you just think about it, if you are in a position, especially the chief of police, and you're trying to align your duties and responsibilities and your resources, how well do they align with the in my case, a county board's priorities? I had a particularly difficult time, and I won't cut into your time too much, but I had a particularly difficult time when we were dealing with serious immigration issues in the county. The whole thing about sanctuary cities and everything that went with that, which Arlington was not. But there was I had a county board that very liberal in thought, and they were to the point that they did not want my agency to work at all with other federal partners, specifically ICE and DHS, and dealing with trying to walk that fine line with them about, I still have to do other investigations that aren't solely immigration cases, at the same time meet the mandates being put on me by my county board and county manager, you walk on eggshells the entire time, and you try to educate to the best of your ability. And I think ultimately that was what it was about, was educating them on what we were actually doing versus what the perception was by the community. And very clearly, Arlington County has zero interest in being immigration authority agents. But when you have immigration showing up with logos on their back that say police, not federal agent, it can be a challenge. I'll leave it at that. But that's what I mean. The politics of being in a senior position, not necessarily in a bad way of politics of, being Democrat or Republican, but the politics of managing your alignment with your county or your chief executive's priorities may be different.
Michelle, I'm going to dazzle you with this. I'm going to tell you Jay's favorite number. Just a second. Jay, how many people were on the Arlington City Council?
5.
Your favorite number is 3. It always had to be 3. You had to have 3 people on your side all the time. It's 3 to 2, 3 to 2 to 3 to 2. You need to have that majority, and it's very, very troublesome. Let me throw this in. When I negotiate a contract for a chief of police or a fire chief, here's the contract I try to get them. 2 years from today, 2 years from today, every day you show up, your contract gets extended 2 years. You have selected me to be your chief of police. I'm going to do the absolute best job I can. But if you ever ask me to do something that's illegal or immoral or doesn't meet my standards of excellence, I'm going to say no. And you can write me a check for 2 years. You've got 2 years to find somebody who will do your bidding. And I've got 2 years to maintain my integrity and find the new job. But I see so many chiefs who need the paycheck. They have kids in school. They need the insurance. They need the health plan. So that they bend their ethics to meet the ethics of the city council. That should never happen. So, excuse me. You can show you this is not rehearsed. We need to make sure that we have that city council support all the time, and never get in bed with any one city council member. If you're going to talk to one, you talk to all 5. If you're going to have dinner with one, you have dinner with all 5. There are many open meetings acts and many other things that require this type of stuff, but never rely on one city council person. On Tuesday night, I will tell you an absolute horror story where a chief of police almost ended up in federal prison because he didn't listen to my advice on becoming a friend of one city council person and all the things that came out of that. And I'll talk about that on Tuesday night. Sorry to interrupt there, Michelle.
No, absolutely. I love your stories. They're absolutely wonderful. And I'm feeling the spring allergies too. The flowers are out. We've got the April showers and we've already got the May flowers. But yeah, this and I think we talked about it a little bit before too, the importance of outreach, building relationships before you need them, and really thinking about who your stakeholders are and making sure they're people who know who you are and who know that you are ethical and good. And we're assuming that all of you are ethical and good and doing the right thing, because you're here to learn. But really don't just tell people you're good. Really show up, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. And so build those relationships, find ways that you can show how your agency is being helpful to them. And hopefully they'll ask how they can be helpful to you. But if there are things that you need, don't be afraid to ask, as long as legitimate ethical things. So just saying, hey, this would really help us to help you, so that that community around you, because a lot of those community members also have influence over the city council. But Gordon mentioned open meetings laws. I remember very beginning of my career, as in my 20s, I was a newspaper reporter in Milwaukee, and there were some public officials. There was someone there had given us a tip that they were kind of going in, one at a time to confer about a sensitive issue. And they said, Michelle, go over there and see what they're doing, because they were violating open meetings laws. And there's going to be someone who's going to find out. You never know who in your office is watching and saying, hey, this is not good. I don't feel comfortable speaking up about it. But if you don't create an atmosphere where people feel comfortable to say, hey, there's something I feel like we need to fix, they're going to go, underground to local. Well, hopefully we'll still have local newspapers at that point, but they're going to go and they're going to talk to someone else who can get the word out. So you really want to make sure that everybody is on the up and up. And as we talked about last week, if it's clear that there's some people who should not be on the force, should not be in your department, but make sure that you're not just bumping them around and around and around, but make sure that they are gone, because even people who are not at your specific agency, who are in the profession, who are not doing great things, are hurting the reputation of everybody in the profession. And, here in Chicago, we know that very well. And, there are a lot of good cops, but the kind of the bad ones are the ones who have established the reputation of the city. And it's a lot harder to undo a bad reputation than it is to just start out from the beginning having a good reputation.
So much to talk about on Tuesday night. Jay, how do we do? Do we hit these adequately for the intro?
Yeah, I think you've given everybody some really good points to ponder over the next few days before you get into the live session, and covered the core areas for this week. The only thing I would have left here for this evening is you both had assigned readings. Michelle, you had chapters 11 through 13, and Gordon, I know you were some things on chapters 13 and 14 of Risk. So if you'd like to close the session out with some thoughts on the readings, that'd be great.
Well, of course, 11 through 13 are really about organizational questions, about understanding the risk preferences of the group, the people, it applied to public safety in your agency, but also in your community. And there are also some pretty strong lessons for personal change. And the story of Cos Marte, the former drug dealer in Lower Manhattan who was sent to prison. He was doing 7 years, and the prison doctor told him, look, your cholesterol's through the roof, your sugar's through the roof, and you keep on like this, you're not going to make it out. And he had this aha moment and lost 60 pounds in 6 months, started training other people, and got out and started a gym. And so I interviewed him, really asking him, how did this happen? And the message was really about good risk ecosystems versus bad risk ecosystems, that he had grown up in an environment, that involved the neighbors, the police, the gangs, the everything, the opportunities and lack of them, that made it very, very easy for him to slip into taking bad risks. And when he got out, he was very lucky to connect with people who were dedicated to creating a good risk ecosystem, to help people like him to understand business management skills, to get them to figure out how to get loans and how to really contribute to things. And so as a result of that, he was able to be an absolutely amazing example. And so I think it's worth really reflecting on the key messages of this part of the book, which is personal change, yourself changing the risks that you take, but also working on changing the risks, the risks that your organization as a group takes, and also thinking about how that applies to your community. I actually got an email recently from a group that works on helping young men in gangs to turn to better activities. And so we've actually been talking about using some of these risk awareness and risk empathy principles to help these young men to think differently about the risks that they're taking, why they're taking them, and how to create an ecosystem that encourages good risks. And I think that, you hear the, it takes a village and things like that changing someone is not just a simple thing, that you need lots of different community members and circumstances and agencies to help people turn around. And that's hugely important in public safety. So I hope that you enjoy those chapters and learn from some of the stories of the people in them as well.
Great, thanks,
I'm
Michelle.
embarrassed to tell you that I don't have I'm doing this remotely. I don't have my notes from the crystal readings, so I won't be able to comment on that till Tuesday night. But when Michelle was talking, my brain went back to Freakonomics, a book I read, and they had an entire chapter on there on a very successful drug dealer. Had he been in any legal profession, he would have been a billionaire. This guy was so clever on the way he built his business, but sadly, he built it in an illegal industry. But he had all those skills, and if he just would have gotten a different direction in life, it could have really changed things. But that was a good book on Freakonomics. But I will make comments on McChrystal's book on Tuesday night.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Just a couple things on to get people to thinking about. There were a few takeaways for me. One was, the problem with predictions. And I get asked all the time about predicting things. And I have to tell people that it's not about predicting something down to the precise, minute, second of how far the stock market's going to fall or when certain things are going to happen. They're things that you don't know exactly, but you don't have to know exactly to put in place control measures. It's more about being resilient in general. So wanted to make sure that you pay a lot of attention to that message. The second was his detect, assess, respond, learn framework, which is a great everyday thing to apply. And then finally, a comment about the power of simple acts. And I cannot emphasize that more. And it's different simple acts for everyone, but you might have a particular habit or a particular thing that you do, or might notice that there are things that other people do. It can be simple acts of kindness. It can be simple acts of self-affirmation. I mean, remember the Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live way back, I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Think about the simple acts that you are doing and that you might be able to change. There's also research about if you show gratitude regularly, you are also going to be less stressed and happier and more productive and, 6 feet taller and more beautiful and everything. But that the power of simple acts is a really important takeaway, along with so many of the important takeaways from General McChrystal's work.
Michelle and Jay, you both heard this. Anybody who tries to predict the future is going to be an idiot. And I remind people, there's a big difference between predictions and projections. I can't predict exactly, but I can tell you which direction we're headed. So it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, as you said that, Gordon, I was thinking about when Michelle talked about prediction, but trends may be giving you an indication of things to come, but yet I see trends that go along and all of a sudden the trend ends. So I'm not sure if I would know what the magic bullet is for that.
But enough about Tesla.
Enough about Tesla. I think you guys have covered this week extremely well and should give people some things to think about as we get into the live session. Any last thoughts before we close out for the night from either of you?
Well,
we have to promise to be a little shorter this week.
Yes. And I am really looking forward to Tuesday night. We're almost 3/4 of the way through the program in reading the 4.1 projects. Very, very impressive stuff. And looking forward to getting this all squared away for your final project where you can go back and maybe change the direction of your agency. That's the exciting thing for me.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for viewing the mini lecture this week. And I'm sure Gordon and Michelle will be looking forward to seeing you all in the live session coming up later in the week.